they made arrests on Sunday, both during a demonstration and beforehand, from an opposition party that's basically considered to be, pro-Russian proxy force trying to overthrow the government. And they say that they broke up a plan that was being run by the FSB. $10,000 was involved. We'll have to see, obviously, from court filings, but it does seem as though this has been an ongoing problem that they've, made arrests on now.
To ask a very stupid and naive question, why would the Russians want to infiltrate and possibly take over Moldova? I mean, it's tiny for a start, isn't it?
It's really tiny, and it's the poorest country in Europe. It shares its eastern border is shared with Ukraine, and its western border is shared with Romania, which is a member of NATO. So it's a bit of a buffer zone in the current conflict. The Russians historically have considered Moldova to be sort of part of the imperial empire, even though it's a Romanian-speaking sort of Latin country, not Slavic like Belarus or Ukraine. They've always considered it part of the empire. It was part of the USSR. And there's just a belief that, Putin wants to return to some of the old borders in Europe.
And police are saying that a Russian undercover agent had infiltrated groups of diversionists to stir up unrest and promised some of them money. Was there a tangible result that we know they were after?
I think that they've been trying to raise the heat, so to speak, on the current government, because after the war in Ukraine started, they saw, energy prices went sixfold, I think, in Moldova after Russia started limiting transfers and supplies through the border through Ukraine. So the government's been desperately, getting aid and trying to pay everybody or helping pay everybody's electric and gas bills. But this group has over time been pushing to sort of cause unrest in the hopes that the government will come down. And they're backed by a couple of oligarchs, both of which are fugitives after stealing about $1 billion 10 years ago. And they'd like to see the government come down, Moldova sort of return to the Russians' orbit, and that way they can come home and acquit themselves.
And what's the atmosphere like there? I mean, I imagine the revelation of this plot, and then the fact that it seems to be tangible and credible would create at least a sense of insecurity in the country. I mean, how fervently independent of Russia are Moldovans?
They're pretty divided. People have told me that it'd be a coin toss between the opposition party, which is primarily backed by Russia, and the current government, which leans towards the EU. But it's it's not really the political situation that has people concerned. With its history as being part of the Soviet Union and being very close to Russia's orbit ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union, there's been so much intelligence service, security service, and even foreign service and diplomatic type stuff infiltrating into the Moldovan structures and sort of state. So as a result, there's a lot of concerns that a lot of the security people inside Moldova might have dual loyalties to outside the country. But what one person told me was that so long as Putin's losing in Ukraine, they'll probably stick with the government.
You've been there for a few weeks now. Can you give me a sense of what Moldova is like? Because we're talking about it and I think probably my listeners feel very much like me. I have no sense of Moldova. We heard about it a lot when the war first started because they were obviously the first port of call for a lot of refugees. Are there still a lot of Ukrainians in Moldova?
Moldova and Ukraine have a very close relationship, sharing a border, and Odessa is extremely close by. Many Moldovans I met are intermarried with Russian and Ukrainian families. You can speak Russian just as easily as you can Romanian on the streets. But it is a poor kind of sleepy country. It's heavy in agriculture, and rural poverty is some of the worst in Europe, which is sort of behind the current political crisis. A lot of the poor people, rural folks, are supportive of Russia. They feel completely ignored, and that the situation in Ukraine is causing them economic pain, and they're being incited to protest against it.